it is not what all the time what the firm is giving you, but a lot of time just doing that bit from your side, which kind of makes that firm what it is. For you to think like a leader, you don't need to be in a leadership position. It's in the mindset. One very important part is the culture of the organization, which should not be toxic for you to kind of work in an environment like that. Initial hurdle, what we will always come across is the fact that, the so what of it. For aspiring HR people, you need to develop a very balanced view of a people centric view and a business centric view, both coming together.
Good morning. Let's start with a brief introduction of our honorable guest, Nimisha ma'am from Alvarez and Mawson. She is an Institute of Management Development and Research alum and a graduate from Miranda House, University of Delhi. Ms. Nimisha is currently the Chief Human Resource Officer of Alvarez and Mawson. She has over 2 decades of experience in the field of human resources with globally renowned multinational firms and reputed Indian franchises such as BCG, Accenture, and Tech Mahindra. Welcome to this podcast, ma'am.
Thank you, Yash.
Ma'am, it's an honor to have you with us today. Ma'am, could you share a little bit about your illustrious career journey? What were some of the key milestones and turning points that shaped your journey in HR, ma'am?
Well, the last 2 decades, I've not been really a job hopper. So my career really comprises of three main companies. I did a very short stint in Tech Mahindra in the initial part of my career when I just joined them from campus, but and that was just about a year and a half. And because I've stayed in organizations for longer durations, I think those organizations really, created my career graph. I Accenture, I was there for about 7 years, and as I was mentioning to you earlier, that I was with both the line HR of the firm as well as the HR consulting from Accenture. So that gave me an opportunity to really try my hands at how things are done from a client perspective and how you do it for your own organization. Then I moved on and joined the Boston Consulting Group. I had the opportunity to really lead a large part of the people function there. And moving on from there, I joined Alvarez and Marsal, and I've been in, and with BCG, I was again for about 4.5 years there. And with Alvarez and Marsal, I've been for the last 7 years heading their HR. But the company has really seen the growth. When I joined the firm, it was about close to 120 people. Now it's touching about 400, and the plan is to just keep growing further. We also came up with a global capability center. So the last 7 years in A&M has actually seen a lot of, milestones in itself. So yeah, the milestones. What I would say is that within these three organizations, I think I've been fortunate enough to have come in an era where, in the consulting world, I think a lot was getting shaped up, and a lot of those practices, the people practices, the way things are really done, and the engine is run in the organization. It was being set up in the early 2000s to say about till about 2015, 18. People in consulting, when they came, they were small, and their focus was more to kind of cater to client leads, and they were not really looking internally that much. And then they realized that, oh, they're hiring some, the press brains of the country, and they really need something which is powerful enough to really keep the people engaged within the firm as well. And that's when the people practices started coming up within the consulting firms, right? And as I said, I was fortunate to be part of those. And the milestones that I've seen in my career actually kind of coincides with consulting. Like, when, for example, when I was in Accenture, I was the team who was setting up service lines, the functional horizontals that you call, within Accenture Consulting. Moving on, then TNO Consulting was also formed in front of me. So I was part of the initial team that kind of started TNO Consulting, Talent and Organization Consulting in Accenture, and so on and so forth. There was like Accenture is known for kind of coming up with new things every now and then, and all of that was something that I kind of witnessed it at that point in time and had the opportunity to be part of it, contribute, learn, and then moved on. Right when I went to BCG again, the whole focus was that we get this whole people function to a level which is like a state of the art form. So we pretty much revamped the performance management system. There's something which is very good what they do there is they not just assess your performance every 6 months, they also do a potential assessment. So the whole rollout of that, where you are doing performance and potential assessment both. Now, how to define potential, how to really have the right dimensions, so that the person is not really fooling around when you are really having conversations, right? As I said, that every year something or the other happened. Then BCG at that point in time took the first step to grow laterally. It's largely a homegrown organization, and it's, I think, back to that again. But when I was there was a year when we hired about close to 50-55 people from outside, and that was like the largest hiring ever done in BCG. So again, it was kind of a great experience to kind of go out in the market and hire for a company that had never really done hiring from outside. And with that came the huge responsibility of integrating those lateral people into a homegrown environment, right? So there was an integration program that was running as well. Coming to my latest, company, which is Alvarez and Marcel. I mean, as I said, when I came, it was actually a small company with about 120 people. Again, the HR practices were basic to kind of just meet the needs of what was required, but the ask was to kind of take it to the next level where people really feel very engaged with the firm, and you have that evolving people practice in the firm. So right from, again, ensuring that everybody is aware of what it takes for them to grow in the firm, which is defining a very robust performance management system for them, to having a good learning and development program, to having engagement, and the recent being diversity and inclusion team that we have set up. There've been just milestones every year that the firm has seen in people function, and I'm very happy, and I feel content to say that I've played a critical part in that. So yes, those that has been kind of a short or a long summary of what you asked right now.
Ma'am, it's really inspiring to see you lead so many 0 to 1 journeys, right? And that's essentially what we as students are trying to do at Masters Union. So it's truly inspiring to see that. Ma'am, I've also heard a lot about your leadership roles in these globally renowned companies. Can you elaborate on these, specific leadership achievements, right? And how we as students can groom ourselves to be better leaders, right? Because 10 years down the line, I see us, leading some parts of business, hopefully. So can you guide us with that?
See, I think one thing I would suggest, I think a lot of it is around the mindset that you work with, right? If you work with a mindset that you are working for an organization that is somebody else's, and you are here to kind of maybe have your own share in the pie in terms of, coming, doing your job, getting your salary, getting your bonus, getting your performance ratings, all of that, and then go back home. That will not really make you a leader. And now looking back, when I see myself, that how I used to think or think even today, and what I also see in people who have really grown very fast in their career, or have grown as leaders, I think it's that mindset of working in a company as if it's yours. And that's what we call the entrepreneurial mindset. It is not what all the time thinking that what the firm is giving you, but a lot of time just, you know, um, doing that bit from your side, which kind of makes that firm what it is. You know what I mean? So you are the company. You are not really asking that, okay, this is what I was looking for. I need that work life balance. I need that money. I need that growth. And trust me, all of that will happen if you work with that mindset that this is my company. And I know I'm not saying that you get married to a company and you just work for that one company. But I can only talk from my own experience because I've had, as I said, longer stints in every firm. And it is, I think, to some extent because of that, that it takes me something to kind of leave the firm because I feel that I've invested so much in this company, right? And it's only when I have decided to leave is when I feel that, you know, maybe I've done my bit here and I have to kind of move on and do something more. And right now, I'm not getting that opportunity here. So that should be the trigger. And then I think rest will follow. But I would say that for you to think like a leader, you don't need to be in a leadership position. You don't need to be the CEO, or you don't need to be a head of a BU or something. It's in the mindset. There's a consultant level person in my company, and I was just talking with him, and we had run a survey, and people were again cribbing a little bit about work life balance and this and that. And I was talking that how do I really solve for it, because ultimately it's a very high, fast paced consulting client driven environment that we work. So we try to create an environment which is not very stressful for you, but we can't really commit a 9 to 5 job for you. It can't be that you pack your bags at 6 and you leave. You will have some late nights. You will have, those days when there are deliverables to be given the next day, and you are slogging your, time that particular day. But then we will make your life comfortable through ways and means. One very important part is the culture of the organization, which should not be toxic for you to kind of work in an environment like that. All of that. And that person said very one thing, and he has a consultant level. I said, Nimisha, have you ever heard partners talking about work life balance? Have you ever heard the SMDs talking about work life balance? So why are we all the time talking about work life balance? Right? And that was the mindset of an MD. He was not working like a consultant. He had the mindset of an MD that I am running this PNL. I want to kind of, make this happen, and my client should be out to never really look at anybody else other than, A&M for this particular job. If that's the feeling or passion with which you will drive your job, be it in consulting or any other firm, I think you will really succeed. And that's really what has happened with me also. I have always worked in firms, and I actually imbibed it from my father. When in fact he worked in a government organization, but he still felt and always said that you work in a company as if it's yours, you will always succeed, because you will always try to take the right decision, and it will fall in place.
Right, right. And ma'am, with such a illustrious and a long career, I'm sure there have been a lot of challenges and hurdles. Can you throw some light on that and how you navigated through those hurdles?
See, I'll tell you, Yash, HR, in to some extent, is a very thankless job, so to say, right? I mean, you are not getting revenue for the firm. What you are doing is creating an experience which is also sometimes very intangible. You experience it, but you can't really put a number there and say, okay, this is what it is, right? And and also it's very feeling based experience. Like, you whatever you do for the employees, they may not still be there will be people who will still not be happy, because you're catering to a organization which is diverse, and people have their different priorities. So it's not very sales driven or revenue driven, apart from, of course, recruiting, where you directly kind of go and recruit people and make a difference there. But most of the other functions, there is more of giving that intangible experience to an individual and making them feel part of the firm. uh, so the hurdle is that, one, you make that invisible visible enough for people to not really ignore. And I think a lot of it comes from your homework that you do, the credibility that you earn in the organization. And how do you really do that is when people know that you know your job, when you're not talking in the air. And I think that also comes because I've been brought up largely in consulting, is that whatever we do today is always backed by insights, analysis, benchmarks, data. It's not really that, it's just coming out in the air and anybody can challenge it. I mean, of course, people are free and, most welcome to challenge. That also gives you a healthy environment to think through divergent point of views. But all what I'm saying is that you need to be really very thorough with your job, and the content that you are delivering, right? So the initial hurdle, what we will always come across, is the fact that, so what of it. You are doing diversity and inclusion. Okay, so what? Like, if what if we are not really out there in the market to kind of, you are losing out on opportunities, you are losing out on a lot of diverse talent which other companies are lapping on, and you are missing out on that. How do you then convince the organization that missing out on that also leads to something, right? So that is when I say that the power of data, and now with AI and everything coming in, of course, life is becoming simpler to kind of get to that bottom of the point. But uh, that's the hurdle, I would say, is the biggest hurdle, where I feel that to make HR a function which is as important as business, right? You really need to show that tangibleness, if it's really a word, but the tangibility of the outcomes that you are driving for the organization.
Absolutely. And ma'am, you spoke about data, right? people analytics in these recent times has become such a big trend, right? A lot of these organizations that we've, sort of seen have specific people analytics functions now that solely work on, crunching these people numbers and getting outcomes out of that. So I think that's an emerging trend. Uh,
That's actually not an emerging trend, and maybe in consulting it was never an emerging trend, because consulting actually purely thrived on this kind of work, right? I mean, clients used to hire because they used to get deep into analysis, deep into the bottom of a problem, problem solving skills and all of that. So for me, as I said, that I've been brought up with this whole thinking that you need to not just recommend something out of a fab because you feel, I mean, there could be a gut. That is the starting point, that you feel there is a requirement for that, and then go backwards and work, around what is the market going to do, what is maybe ahead of the time. Sometimes you also have to think ahead of the times and not just what is happening right now, right? So there are these things and what it will lead to in future or in a couple of years, right? All of that is something that you have to think through when you build your solutions. And data analytics, and I think that has all really led to AI. I mean, if all this was not so powerful enough, nobody would have really invested so much time and energy to build and work towards AI, right? It's all coming from the fact that you can do nothing without really getting to the bottom of anything. And that's what AI is doing. And because that was a time taking effort, now what AI is doing is making it simpler for you. But yeah, that will never go, the
Right,
importance of it.
absolutely. I'm double clicking on the HR trend of things. Uh, over the past 5 years, especially after COVID, we've seen so much emergence in these HR trends. Let's say, digital transformation, remote work, and there's a lot of change in the future of work. To say, what are your thoughts on that, and where do you see this trend going?
It's becoming more and more challenging, Yash. And to be very frank, we are today standing at that point of significant change or a flux where things are going to significantly be different from here on. One, there is a new generation of people like you who is entering the workforce and who have been brought up again significantly different than how the past generation was brought up, right? So even in the DNA of this whole generation that is going to enter the workforce, or that has already entered the workforce in fact, is very, very different. And the whole workforce really, so we can't, this whole ecosystem can't really survive in isolation, that there is this professional corporate environment and then there is an environment which is society at large. I think they all really kind of coincide with each other and create this harmony that can be sometimes be disturbing, and sometimes you have to be in a that peaceful harmony relationship, and then only it works. I think the job of HR is becoming increasingly difficult and complicated because it's twofold. It's one, of course, all the analytics, analysis, and data driven, and everything that you just spoke about, right? The other is the softer elements of it. We are also now increasingly talking about mental well-being, mental, physical well-being, right? We are talking about inclusion. We are talking about whatever, but work life balance, a sense of giving a purpose to individuals. You can't just work without asking questions. You can't just work without knowing why you are working, which was to, mind you, not really there, say, 10 years ago, right? And there are memes today coming where you say that, humse kisne pucha tha, right? But yes, now the people are asking questions and it is important, and they are not going to let go without getting the answer. So there are a lot of what do you call? There is a change that the leadership has to go through to kind of deal with this new change that has come up. There's of course technology, but there is a big, I would say, a ocean of problems that is lying in front of us when it comes to these softer elements, largely around well-being. You came across a situation where we are hearing stories that people are committing suicide, people are having health concerns at very young age, and they are, dying. They're all very serious issues. AI is not going to solve all this problem also, right? There is a huge amount of role that the leaders need to play, and HR needs to enable that to kind of make it happen for the organizations, where you live in a culture that's thriving, that's not toxic. You build the right checks and balances, you deliver to the client. I'm not really saying that you will not have a tough day. There should also be ways and means to build resilience amongst people. That, I think, is an idea which is in some way, and I could be maybe triggering a controversy here, but I feel there has to be a middle path somewhere, because I don't think today, and the world is really at come at a stage where you can have it all. You will have to give up few things to kind of take on certain things, right? And if at all the generation is not realizing that, we already have AI knocking the doors, right? More and more jobs will just start getting replaced if we feel that there is more complexity in hiring human beings than machines, right? So there has to be a balance there in between, where we have human beings need to show that we are still better off than AI, right? Or machines or robotics, right? And how will you really do that? I think resilience is something which is not, which machines cannot really have. I mean, you can of course keep rebooting the machine and fixing it, but what I'm saying is that the ability to reinvent yourself, the ability to really stand up on your feet time and again, think through, fight back, all our grit. There is a TED talk which kind of has proven that grit is the one skill that is found common in most of the leaders. And if you really go into again analysis of what really makes somebody successful, grit is that one single skill that comes out, not intelligence, not IQ, not smartness, not your academic records. So I think we have to really form a that's and if you're asking me today, I really don't have a perfect answer for you, because as I said, that we are really in a flux where we are figuring out ways and means to ensure. And I think the basic, I would say, to start with, is that don't have a toxic culture in your workplace. That's the basic. Then we can start from there and build ecosystems which are more sustainable. But that's where we are. That's, I think, the most worrying thing that I see today when I'm seeing the future of work.
Correct. And ma'am, continuing on this conversation only, ma'am, what's been your favorite use case or the most innovative HR practice that you've implemented in your 2 decades of career? What's that one use case you can think of?
I think it was a very interesting project that I worked when I was working on that whole performance potential matrix thing, because to kind of assess people on potential and give them that clarity as to how they can move their career in the next 1 year so that they get to the next level. I think it was a very challenging job to create that whole framework. We, of course, borrowed a lot from global, but then to make it more, attuned to India. I think that was a very good project that I did, which kind of gave me a sense of, think that, okay, there's a lot of thinking through, and there was a lot of, foolproofing that we did in that whole project. Apart from that, I think we also did something very interesting in A&M, where we did this whole, again, similar a little bit, but this whole thing of path to partnership from, your current level to how do you really become a partner. Again, defining the whole project and the dimensions, parameters, running the whole thing. The recent, I think I'm being very proud of, the third one, I would say, is my diversity and inclusion thing, which I had not done in the past. And when and with everything that was happening around, I really felt that we are nowhere 2 years back. So first I thought that at my own level I was not able to give enough time to it, because there was, of course, so many other things that was happening. So I hired somebody to dedicatedly work for diversity and inclusion. Incidentally, that person is from other communities. He's from the LGBTQ community, so he's very passionate about, of course, driving the cause. So that at a hiring level itself, I think I took a conscious call that I need to get somebody from a diverse community to run it with that passion, and he has that passion to kind of make a difference. And in the last 2 years, we have made such significant jumps in the whole scheme of things when diversity and inclusion comes into picture. I think I'm very proud. When we were starting, my CEO, who I report into, he was saying, no, HR, I mean, why will you do it? Diversity and inclusion needs to be a very unbiased team, and HR is doing your performance management, this and that. So how will you really drive it? And I said, I'm so passionate about it. I'm certain that I'll be able to do it. Give me a chance. If you're not happy, we'll of course hire somebody or whatever and take it away from me. And you want this to be done as an independent function or whatever. But I'm so happy that I proved him wrong. And in the last 2 years, a lot of initiatives happened under diversity and inclusion. We created a Women India network. We created a mentoring platform. We created a return mother program where mothers come from maternity. We have a 2 months of paternity leave in A&M, which is very rare in any of the other firms, in India especially. Most of the firms give just about 2 weeks. And the premise of it was also not just that fathers should get that. I think I was more coming from the fact that there's so much a woman goes through when they become a mother, and at that critical point in time the father is absent because they are tending to work, and it's so important for them to also not just go through the fatherhood at that point in time, but also see the whole change that his partner is going through at that point in time, which is why they will develop more sensitivity and empathy towards women when they will see what has happened to their wives during this period of time, rather than when everything is set, your 6 months baby is there, and everything is back to normal and you're playing with the kid and having a good time with your wife, right? Those are the difficult times, the first 2 3 months. So that was coming from the premise of there. So I think that's my, I would say, my recent achievement, which I'm very happy about.
Now, a very interesting thing you spoke about is that the DNA of the new gen coming into work is changing, and obviously when you're running an organization, developing and retaining key talent is critical. Ma'am, what strategies does A&M take to develop, retain, and grow the key talent within its firm?
Well, develop is always about having a very good, relevant learning and development program. So we have training programs designed for every level, which is relevant for them, be it behavioral skills or technical skills. There are levels which are very level readiness programs also. You become from an individual contributor, you become a manager, what all things are required for you now to get into a managerial role. And then from a manager, you become a leader. Then the scale of or the quality of training changes. So all of that is the development part in terms of your skill and your, the way you are growing as an individual and as a professional in the firm. The other elements are things like what I just mentioned. There's a mentoring program that we run. It's very important for you to kind of get guidance, not just purely work basis, but in general. So there are people who have been there, done that. And why don't you take mentoring and guiding from people who you can relate to? So we've created a structured mentoring program also for that. So these are, I'll not like that. The list is very long. Like just how I just said that we have hybrid working model. So that's very important to give flexibility to your individuals. They can't just be all the time be in office. I think COVID, the one good thing that it did was introduced hybrid or remote working in most of the organizations where it was not present there. So that is another thing that we provide, which is flexibility, and it's very people friendly engagement programs that we have. Whether, as I said, giving a paternity break to even our insurance program for that matter, we encourage all inclusive program, all inclusive benefits are there. Gender change operations can be done, egg freezing can be done. So we are just calling it out loud that we accept you the way you are, and in terms of whatever support you need to kind of thrive in your life, we are there. These are some of the indicators that we kind of have in the firm to support that claim. So that's how we are doing
Right.
it.
And ma'am, continuing on this trajectory itself, ma'am, you also mentioned that, as an organization, you need to make sure your organization does not have a toxic work environment, right? It's very important that you have a positive work environment so that the talent grows. Ma'am, just, continuing on this line, ma'am, what does A&M do to create like a positive environment?
See, one is it actually happens from the top, right? So the leaders, it's a very non-hierarchical form. I think that is something that I love about A&M, and I hope it continues even if it grows to a certain number where, again, people just become too busy or it becomes too large to have a name to every face. But so far, we've been able to create a culture where MDs are pretty much MDs and senior directors, or your leaders, people who are in the leadership roles, are pretty accessible to everyone. We also have a 360-degree feedback system. So if you're not happy with somebody and somebody is really making your life hell, you have the opportunity to give feedback to this person anonymously, and it's really dealt with. Like, people are really given stern feedbacks when they get a bad upward, that what the hell are you doing, right? So we have those kind of checks as well in place, where a junior is can give a feedback to an individual, and those feedbacks are taken very seriously. It's not so easy to get promoted in the organization with a bad upward feedback, right? And then it's mostly the leader's behavior that kind of says so. I mean, I think again the firm has been really um, intelligent enough to kind of hire the right kind of leaders who have been so far able to contain the culture of the firm. We have a monthly India update where everybody comes, and there's a lot of camaraderie that happens in that update call. There are a lot of details that are discussed in that call, wherein all the employees are there, and you will just be amazed with the transparency that leadership shows when it comes to talking about revenue, about numbers, about what is coming up in future, and all of that. It's not a secret, so everybody feels as if they are part of it and they know what's happening there, so it's not like a dark hole. So those are the things that we ensure that it happens in the firm, but it all actually depends on how leadership drives their behavior. It's a very critical part of creating a non-toxic environment.
Right. And ma'am, you also spoke about, how the role of the HR is going to become more difficult by the day, right? What is that one advice or one thing that, aspiring HR professionals need to do to upskill themselves and get ready for those challenges, ma'am?
I think read a lot, like just be more aware of what's happening. Try to stay ahead of the changes. If you are in a B school, then attempt as much as possible real life scenarios, case studies that will give you actually, that will put you in the shoes of the people who are actually, on the other side. But I think I can only say that for aspiring HR people, you need to develop a very balanced view of both what I was saying initially, a people centric view and a business centric view, both coming together. I don't think any HR professional will really ever succeed if you don't have business lens, and you're only thinking from a people perspective. That's very good. You must think from people perspective. That's why you are in the organization, to be that face of that thing. But it can't be without having a business lens. So a good balance of business and people lens is something that a good, I would say, an HR professional should have. And in order to get have that, you should really go through as much as possible case studies, read up a lot, read about what are the things that are going wrong in an organization, and what are some of the best practices, and develop a point of view. Start developing a point of view, have discussions with your friends on something. Also think as an employer sometimes, think as an employee sometimes. So there are various ways and means of really uh, getting to that point of view, as I said, by having discussions, by having, solving case problems and stuff like that. But just keep your ears and eyes open. Don't be really be that person and don't be also go all the time by the book. At the same time, I'll say that don't go always by the book. Develop a point of view yourself. If you're coming with some level of disruption, some level of freshness in your thinking, don't stop yourself. Don't stop yourself from thinking differently.
Right. And ma'am, I'd like to end this with like a personal question. And since you worked in HR and consulting, and a lot of us here are aspiring consultants, ma'am, on the flip side, what does a consultant need to do to succeed, right? We are all students right now, and a lot of us want to get into consulting, right? How do we prep well and make sure that we have a sustainable career?
You have to understand why clients hire consultants. They hire you because they know this problem can't be solved by their existing teams, right? So you are anyway coming with a pre conceived, or a already a an expectation that you are going to deliver something which his or her current team are not going to deliver for them, right? So you have to show your metal in terms of how you will really add that value to the client. How will you do that? um, your analysis, your homework, the content that you bring onto the table, the way you are thinking through the problem. Problem solving is the crux of consulting up till about you are in the execution mode till about you become a director, principal. Okay. After that, it's all about selling. It's all about you have understood the game, you know what it is, and you start selling. Both are very important. You can be excellent executioners, you can be excellent in your implementation skills, you've got your problem solving right. You can actually get to the crux of the problem by doing a lot of analysis, primary, secondary, due diligences. There are various tools and mechanisms to really, get to the bottom of the problem that you're solving for. And you have mastered the art. But till the time you become, say, a principal in a consulting parlance, or a senior director in A&M, you are now expected to sell all of that. And if you are a shy seller, and if you are somebody who is not so comfortable selling, your career will stop there, no matter how good you were in your execution skills. So, up till about the time, say about your first 7 years, 6, 7, 8 years at the max, 8 years, you should be focusing on making yourself an expert in problem solving.
Correct.
Right? Problem solving of all kinds, in also a varied sector space. And then, of course, as you grow, say about after 5 years, you realize that this is the sector that I really enjoy working in. It could be consumer, it could be healthcare, it could be life science, anything, manufacturing. So you focused and drill down to a certain sector that you really want to focus. Build sectoral experience again for another couple of years. So this is how the career will really go. First 5 years, work for everything. Just learn as much as you possible, sector wise, work wise, project wise. Different leaders have different ways of approaching problems, so you learn from all of those different styles and approaches and stuff like that. And after that 5 years, you start building your sectoral experience. Build that for another 2 3 years, and then comes your business development and selling skills. And that is more critical to succeed eventually on a long term basis as a partner in the firm. Partners are nothing but just salesmen. They are selling all the time to clients. They are solving, they hear client problems and they know this is how, we are going to solve it for you. And they sell that solution to the client. And then the delivery is actually left to most of the time to the rest of the team to deliver, right? That's how it is.
That's very interesting. And when we had our orientation, and we had day one, right? Our founder Pratham, he started the orientation with one statement, and that was a marquee statement: "Sales is everything." And then
Yes.
that's
It
how we
actually kind of
started.
ends.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
started our program on that note, right? So, ma'am, thank you so much for taking the time and
My
sharing
pleasure.
your insights. It's been very, very insightful and inspiring. I'm sure whoever's watching this might will get inspired, and this was a blessing for aspiring consultants. So, ma'am, it was a
Not at
pleasure.
all. Thank you so much. And I think I love the way you all are approaching, the way you are studying today. And I hope you're able to also kind of bring all these elements to work, to wherever you go. And
Absolutely.
all the best. My best wishes.
Thank you so much, ma'am.